All right, let's get right into it. We are diving into a conflict that has put the entire world on edge. The US and Israel have launched this massive military operation in Iran, but there's a huge piece of this puzzle missing, and that's America's allies. So why are they sitting this one out?
This quote, wow, it really gets right to the heart of the international outcry. The feeling is that this decision has, well, unleashed chaos. So this isn't just some isolated military strike, it's a huge event, and the consequences are already rippling out across the entire globe.
And that really is the central question we're tackling today. The Trump administration has laid out its case for war, but the timing, and especially the total lack of international support, it just raises these huge questions. Why now? And really, why are America's closest friends and allies refusing to get involved? Let's break it all down.
Okay, so to really get why America is going it alone, we first have to understand what actually happened. What was this Operation Epic Fury?
Well, this was a massive, decisive blow. I mean, we are talking about thousands of airstrikes aimed right at the very top of the Iranian regime. The main target, and they got him, was the supreme leader himself, a move that was clearly designed to completely decapitate the government.
And the immediate result was just a devastating human toll. Think about that number for a second. Over 1,000 civilians reported killed in just the first few weeks. This figure is absolutely crucial for understanding the international reaction that came next.
So, facing this kind of fallout, the Trump administration laid out three main justifications for the war. We're going to take a look at each one and see how it holds up against reports from their own intelligence agencies and international inspectors.
First up, the administration argued there was an imminent threat from Iran's ballistic missile program. They claimed these missiles could endanger U.S. troops, our allies, and maybe even the American homeland itself.
But here's where things get really interesting. You see this major contradiction. The administration was warning of a direct threat to the U.S., right? But its own Defense Intelligence Agency, in a report from less than a year before all this, said that Iran was still about a decade away from even having that kind of capability.
Okay, so the second justification was that classic red line, Iran's nuclear program. The argument here was that Iran was on the absolute brink of getting a nuclear weapon, and that left no time for diplomacy.
And the language they used was incredibly urgent. I mean, we're not talking months or years, we're talking a week away. This quote from Trump's chief negotiator was everywhere, and it was clearly meant to create this sense of impending doom that required immediate military action.
And this just perfectly illustrates the disconnect, doesn't it? While the administration was sounding the alarm, the UN's top inspector was basically saying, hold on, the threat isn't immediate. And what's more, sources suggest a new, even stronger nuclear deal was actually being negotiated behind the scenes, a diplomatic path that was ultimately just tossed aside in favor of war.
And finally, the third reason. This one was more moral, more aspirational. The idea that this was a war of liberation. The message was sent directly to the Iranian people, hey, this is your chance to take back their country from a tyrannical regime.
But here's the thing. When you look for the plan, the day-after plan, it just doesn't seem to be there. No clear strategy to support an opposition, no framework for a new government. And then, this stunning admission that they didn't even know who was in charge after the strike. The whole thing seems to have been based on the hope that the regime would just spontaneously implode. And, well, that just didn't happen.
So if the official justifications feel a little shaky when you hold them up to the light, what else could be driving this decision? Well, the sources suggest we might need to look at motivations that are a lot more personal and a lot more political.
This timeline is just fascinating because it shows a complete 180. You have Donald Trump, the candidate who ran as this anti-war isolationist, who has since governed as one of the most aggressive interventionists in modern American history, with all of it leading up to this war.
And then there's this. In an interview, the president framed the killing of the Ayatollah in these deeply personal terms. It sounds like direct retaliation for alleged Iranian assassination plots against him. This suggests a motive that's maybe driven less by national security and more by settling a personal score.
So what this all seems to point to is this approach that treats foreign policy almost like a reality TV show. The focus isn't on careful, long-term strategy, but on creating a huge, spectacular, legacy-defining event, what one supporter even called a Berlin Wall moment.
This whole focus on a dramatic, go-it-alone moment brings us right back to the other half of our question. Where are America's allies in all this? And as it turns out, their answer came back loud and clear. This is not our war.
For a country like Japan, the reason is just simple survival. An incredible 93% of its oil,
passes through the Strait of Hormuz, the very waterway that's now at the center of this conflict. A full-scale war that closes that strait could literally shut down their entire economy. And you know what? It's a very similar story for Europe. With 90% of their oil and gas being imported, and a lot of that passing through or near the conflict zone, this war has already caused their energy prices to absolutely skyrocket. Their economies are incredibly vulnerable to this.
So yeah, it's not just one thing, it's really a perfect storm. You've got these existential economic fears, a fundamental disagreement with the whole strategy, and frankly, years of frayed diplomatic relations that have just worn away any trust. You add to that overwhelming public opposition at home, and for Japan, actual legal barriers to joining a foreign war, and you can see why the Allies are so unified in their refusal.
And this decision, to go to war and to do it without the backing of a broad coalition, has thrown an already volatile region into just absolute chaos.
The war did not stay within Iran's borders. Not even close. It exploded. A horrific strike on a girls' school killed 165 people. Iran retaliated with strikes all across the region, hitting civilian targets. And now, it's escalated into a full-blown regional conflict, with drones and missiles flying from Cyprus all the way to Dubai.
Which leaves us with this final, really critical thought. If this war was, at its core, about cementing a personal legacy, and if the Allies stayed away because of deep strategic and economic fears, what is the actual legacy that's being created here? For the millions of civilians who are now caught in the middle of this escalating chaos, that is not some theoretical question. It is their reality right now.